Welcome to the Healing Pathway, Part 2, Preparation for the Journey. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rich Hanhart, and I want to welcome you back if you watched my first presentation, and welcome you for the first time if this is the first time you're joining me. The discussion is about how it is that we heal from emotional losses in our lives, emotional wounds. And the presentation is called The Healing Pathway. Now, the healing pathway does in fact have steps, and it has a process by which we can heal. And any process, any journey, any trip you're going to take requires preparation. So today, in this second presentation, I am going to talk about the preparation for the journey. Now, I have gone on many wilderness trips. That's one of my favorite things to do. And the wilderness trips require that you have everything with you that you're going to need in order to survive the trip. So you have to have everything: shelter, food, a source of warmth. If you're going in a canoe, you have to have all the equipment for that, and so on. So it's a long list. And by the time you get done getting ready, you have literally a room filled with things. And then you have to get them in your vehicle selectively and get going on your trip. You can't go on a trip, my point is, without preparation. So today we're going to prepare. And I also hope today that I can help you learn some things about yourself and about the process that we're going to be undertaking. So I want to start where I left off last time. And where I left off last time was talking about the issue of tenderness, and then the issue of gentleness. And we all have this area of tenderness in us. It's usually buried pretty deeply. Our culture doesn't like us to go around being our tender emotional selves. And so we don't show other people that place. But one of the things that happens when we get hurt is that area of tenderness gets buried deeply because it contains more pain. And so we talked last time, and I'm going to share again today, the issue of being gentle with yourselves. So here's the diagram that I put up last time. We'll look at it for just a minute, and we'll talk a little bit more about the reason that area of tenderness is so important. Okay, so here is the chart we put up last time. And if you'll notice, again, the two inner circles represent gentleness and tenderness. And I want to talk more specifically about the tenderness circle. The reason that the tenderness place in you is so important and why I am emphasizing it so early in the presentation is because it is from this place in you that healing will occur. Robert Bly, the famous poet and leader of men's movements, used to comment this way, and I think he was quoting Jung. He used to say, where your wound is where your gold is. And so what he meant by that is that from the very area where you feel most tender, most wounded, where your emotions are the most powerful, is where your healing will emerge. So that's the reason that I wanted to emphasize that and ask everybody to please take a look at their own tenderness. One of the things that you develop over time when you're going to take a trip is a list, a checklist of things that you want to cover or make sure you take with you before you go. And so I have prepared this small checklist of things that I would like to cover today. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because I'm going to cover each subject, but you'll get the idea that there are certain things, certain major headings, and then certain smaller ideas and thoughts that should take place before you begin your journey. So here's a quick look at that list, and we'll begin now with the formal presentation of this preparation for the journey. Okay, I want to take a look now at the idea of becoming a warrior. And this is the first preparation for your journey. And maybe the most important thing that I can offer you today. Now, the idea of warriorship began in my thinking with a book that was written by Chogyam Trungpa, who is a Tibetan Buddhist, he's not with us anymore, who is credited with bringing Buddhism to North America, at least Tibetan Buddhism. He founded the Naropa Institute in Boulder, Colorado, and he led, I think, a lot of people toward understanding what being a warrior was. Now, he was very quick to indicate that warriorship has nothing to do with aggression. Aggression is the opposite of warriorship in the true sense. He said that violence is the problem, not the solution. So he really wanted to be clear about when he talked about warriorship that it didn't mean violence. What warriorship meant to him, and I'll show you how it was manifested in other traditions, was the ability to look in the mirror, the ability to see who you really are, what really makes you up, who are you, in an inner sense. What is really going on inside of you? What kind of person are you? What is there? What is there? When you ask the question, which is a focusing question, what's there inside? Then wait for the answer. And oftentimes your body will answer that question. Okay? You'll have some kind of emotion about that question. But that's what Trungpa meant when he talked about warriorship. As a matter of fact, his book, Shambhala, has a subtitle, The Sacred Path of the Warrior. And I'll be referencing some of the things he said in his book a couple of times as we move along. So there are, I think in all faith traditions, there are warriors. It's people willing to really take a look inside, and people willing to walk the journey toward who they're supposed to be, toward their destiny. and not live out a life that was not meant for them to live. You see, as I talked about last time, I'll talk about it again, that's where our pain comes from. Our pain comes from living lives that we were not supposed to be living, that we were not meant to live. So as we go through, we'll talk about you're becoming a warrior. You're looking at yourself. And I look at myself. Who am I? Who am I really? I think the clearest example, well, there are a couple. Certainly the Buddha was a warrior. He left kingdom where he would have been king, and a sort of perfect life to become an ascetic, a person who denies everything, including the body, until he finally achieved what he was meant to be, sitting under the Bodhi tree, becoming enlightened. But we must look at the path that Jesus took also in his ministry as being sort of the ultimate in warriorship and courage. You see, he knew from the beginning where he was going. He knew the forces against him. And yet he marched straight toward Jerusalem. His whole ministry was headed in that direction, headed directly toward the most humiliating, painful, tormenting death ever invented by man. That's courage. That's warriorship. And he did it as an example for us. And so when he says in Matthew, take up your cross and follow me, he's not talking about us taking up actual crosses or killing ourselves or allowing ourselves to be martyred. He's talking about this courage to really look at who you are. And so that's his definition of being a warrior. So why is it so important for us to become warriors in our lives? Well, we have an enormous adversary. Okay, there is a reason that we are suffering. And it was not supposed to be this way. Eden was perfect. Okay, and a lot of the creation stories, the creation myths, begin with a perfect place, a perfect universe, and then something goes wrong. And indeed, something has gone terribly wrong. I once heard or read that there's a great cosmic battle going on in the universe. And the battle between God and evil is over us. Us. It's over us. It's over our souls. And over our lives. So I want to talk a little bit now about evil. Of course, one of the best places to look for representations and actual understandings of evil is in art. Because people all through history have worked with the evil in their lives by representing it in art. And that's actually a process that we call externalization. It's taking something that's working inside of you and putting it out onto canvas or sculpture or journaling, or poetry, dance. But evil has always been a major theme of that kind of representation. So if you're struggling with this idea, that would be a good place to look. I found one image. Actually, there are hundreds of images, but I selected one here. This is an image of the coyote that I had talk about a little more even, maybe. In the folklore stories of the um, Southwest American native tribes. So here is a representation of that. Okay, so here's this image of a coyote. You can see that it's done very stylized and in the um, native tradition of being very colorful and containing many symbols. There's a half moon, um, which probably indicates that the coyote hunts at night and in the day. As I said above, the coyote kills mercilessly, is very clever in attacking and kills even without the need to eat, without being hungry, kills for killing's sake. And so it's a good representation of evil. And that's the reason that the natives included it in their stories and artwork and traditions. Now let's take a look at another form of evil that is very present and sinister in our culture. And that is the form of twisting our language. One of the great tricks of evil is to twist our language, to make words seem different than they really are intended to be. And so now we're going to take a look at some very important twistings of our language that have caused great harm and agony, actually, among us. Okay, let's take a look at this chart. You will see that there are 4 boxes, but first notice around the outside, there are descriptions of what might be in the boxes. And so there, on the top, there's written positive and negative forces, and on the sides, supernatural force and human behavior. And so you read both horizontally and vertically. And if you see, for example, where evil is written, it's a negative force, but it's also a supernatural force. And the same way you can understand what's in each box. Now, the trick is that we have been told that the opposite of evil is good. But good is a human behavior. It's a choice we make. It's not a supernatural force. And the problem is that we could never defeat evil with our good behavior. And so that's what we've been taught, is if we're just good enough, we can defeat evil, and it will never happen. So what's happened as a result of that, evil has used this twist in our language to torment people. There are many people feeling shame and guilt about not being able to defeat the evil forces that are making them suffer or that are causing them to do things that they don't want to do. And they believe, because they have been told, that if they were just good enough, they could make that happen. But now let's take a look at finishing this diagram. So here is the completed diagram, and here is the right word for the opposite of evil. Love is a supernatural force. It's a God-given force in the universe. And it will always, 100% of the time, defeat evil. And so what do? We can't defeat evil with our good behavior. We've seen that. So we align ourselves with love. We find it. We seek it out. We cause it to occur in our lives by being compassionate and looking for others to love us. That's the answer to that. Again, the point is you can see how evil confuses our language and keeps us from the very thing that we need the most. Now we have seen an example of how it is that we can be fooled, tricked by evil. And again, the native peoples found ways to include the trickster image in their stories. They probably know a lot more about evil than we do because they put it in their stories. They have kept it alive. Evil was the snake in the garden, trickster, image again, and about how it confuses our language, which is very relevant today and very destructive. And just a little aside here, one of the riverbeds along which evil flows in our culture, and we're all susceptible to it, is in politics. Now, we were taught in school that being involved in government is a good idea, it's a good thing. We live in a free country, we want to keep it that way. But evil has found a way to twist that, and it's become a riverbed along which hatred flows. The people who are firmly entrenched, some of them have allowed their emotions to cause hatred toward the other party. The other party is not somebody to hate. That's another twist. It's another trick, using something that's supposed to be good and using it to twist and allow our unresolved hatred, our strong anger to flow out in a way that we deem completely okay. That's all right to be that way. Well, no, it's not all right to be that way because it will be destructive to you personally, which is always evil's intention. Now, there are some solutions, of course. And I'll be talking about those as we go through. Certainly the healing practices I'll be talking about are counters to any negative force that may impinge on your life. The faith traditions of our world, for the most part, have been counters to what might be destructive. So we'll be looking at those things as we go through. I want to talk just for a second, though, about another one or two. One that's very powerful is what is called the wounded healer. You see, we're always involved in this process of wounding and healing. Okay? We wound each other sometimes. And then we find ways to heal. And in a very close relationship, marriage, very close friendships, there's always this process of wounding and healing going on. And in psychology, we want to see a feedback loop, we call it, which means that if you're in a relationship and somebody gets wounded, that they have a way of sharing that, and the other person has a way of attempting to make that better again. But there are people in the world who we call wounded healers, who have walked the healing pathway, maybe suffered tremendously, and have found a way to emerge from that and be resources, compassionate, healing resources for other people who have or are in the process of suffering with life. Wounded healers, look for them. They're extraordinary people. And they would have a lot to offer if you are a suffering person. Another great gift to us that I don't see talked about very often is what I call the healing triad. Now, the triangle is a perfect geometric form. And I'm not a mathematician, but I think there are certain of these forms that are perfect. A point, a line, a triangle, maybe a square. I'm not sure how many other are considered perfect like that. But the triangle is perfect. I'm going to show you an example in a second here. Because each point on the triangle is in relationship to each of the others. So if you have A, B, and C, A is in relationship with B and C. C is in relationship with A and B. B is in relationship with A and C. And so all are in relationship with everybody else. And so now, let's take a look at one of these triangles, and then I'll explain why they're so important in walking the healing pathway. This diagram is called the shield of the Trinity. It is, of course, the Christian Trinity, and I'm using it as an example for you to understand some things about the triangle, the power of the triangle. So we have the points, Father, Son, and Spirit. And notice in this shield that Father is not Son, Father is not Spirit, Son is not Father, Spirit is not Father, and Son is not Spirit. They are not each other. But in the inner part of the circle is God, and they all are God. And so what happens is that each of the components of a triangle becomes something much greater than themselves and represent something much greater than themselves. And this is the same kind of triangle that you will learn to create for yourself in your healing process. That's why it's so important that you understand the power of the triangle as we get started on this journey together. Okay, so the shield of the Trinity. The shield of the Trinity, actually, before we leave it, was used as a representation of power in the old church, and even in some new churches. As a matter of fact, it was believed that the shield was actually put on the shields of the Crusaders. Unfortunate, maybe, as the Crusades were although we've never found an example of that, a remaining example of the shield of the Trinity being placed on an actual shield. It is used in the architecture of churches, often as a cornerstone. You will find the shield of the Trinity placed there because it represented such great power. So we have many things going for us in this journey to overcome suffering. And it's going to be my task, as much as I will enjoy doing it, it's going to be my task to try as hard as I can to present those things to you in a way that makes sense. So just as a final note, it is my intention to upload one of these presentations every 10 days or so, on or around the 10th, the 20th, and the end of the month, the 30th. So that's my intention. It might be a little longer at some points in time, a little shorter. I will, beginning next time, be suggesting to you preparation for what will be a sort of alternating week by week discussion of healing practices as opposed to the next step on the healing pathway. So that's the plan for now. Again, I appreciate you watching very much. I'm hoping that I can be useful to you, and you can help me by subscribing to this channel and taking a look at my website. So thanks again.